discussion over in Canada, where the government is currently in the process of waging an all-out financial war against the trucker protesters, as frankly well as anyone else who supports them. However, before I give you the actual developments, I would like to share with you something that happened in the year 2020 as sort of a juxtaposition with what's happening today. Back in December of 2020, there was a large protest of farmers over in the country of India. Those farmers, they were specifically protesting against 3 laws that were passed by their federal government, laws that the farmers were claiming were enriching the large corporations while at the same time hurting the small farmers. And so the farmers peacefully marched to the capital, with many of them bringing their trucks, their tractors, as well as their trailers along with them. This is already all starting to sound rather familiar, isn't it? And back then, wouldn't you know it, the first foreign leader to voice his opinion on this matter, meaning the first head of state outside of India to chime in, was Canada's Justin Trudeau. Here's what he said back in December of 2020. Quote, "Let me remind you, Canada will always be there to defend the rights of peaceful protesters. We believe in the process of dialogue. We've reached out through multiple means to the Indian authorities to highlight our concerns. This is a moment for all of us to pull together." And those beautiful comments, well, they bring us right back to the present day. Because, as you are likely aware, after the Trudeau government invoked the Emergencies Act, well, they began to crack down hard on the trucker protest. At first, the Ottawa police began to hand out these notices to the protesters who were on the ground. And these notices, they said this in part, quote, "You must leave the area now. Anyone blocking streets or assisting others in the blocking of streets are committing a criminal offense and you may be arrested. You must immediately cease further unlawful activity or you will face charges." Then, shortly afterwards, the police began to make good on their promise. Videos began to circulate online, maybe you've seen some of them at least, showing swarms of armed police pushing protesters back, smashing truck windows, arresting protesters on gunpoint, and even trampling over top protesters on horseback. Now, on that last point, regarding the horses, one of the women who was actually trampled, you can see her there up on screen, she's the one with the walker, she was sent to the hospital with a shoulder injury, and she eventually made a full recovery. However, it's rather ironic that for a protest that is being branded by the government as essentially a white supremacy summit, well, it was interesting to learn that this protester, the woman who was trampled by the police horse, is actually an Indigenous elder who just disagrees with the vaccine mandates. Now, you might look at the situation and you might be sympathetic to everyone involved, maybe even to the police officers themselves, who you might assume are just being forced to do their jobs and violently break up the protest. But that does not appear to be the case. How do we know? Well, a publication called Rebel News. They were able to obtain a leaked text thread between the Canadian police officers, and frankly, based on the text messages at least, they seem to be enjoying what they're doing. Here are some of the text messages that the police officers were sending back and forth, and please note I hid the names and phone numbers of the officers so that their private information wouldn't be released. Here's what they said. "Time for the protesters to hear our jackboots on the ground." To which one of his colleagues replied, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a kinder and gentler Royal Canadian Mounted Police." To which he then replied, "Okay, we can give out free hugs and unicorn stickers." And then in another one of the exchanges, you can see that one of the police officers shared the video of the horses trampling on the protesters, and here was some of the responses from the other officers. "Wow, that's awesome. We only think we're living the dream. That's what we need to do. Just watch that horse video. That is awesome. We should practice that maneuver. Agreed. Put me back on gyro," which I imagine is the name of the horse, "and they will be served. Haha." That is rather amazing. However, it's perhaps understandable why these police officers are enjoying doing their job so much, because just maybe they are listening to their own politicians, and perhaps by doing so, they think that they are fighting actual Nazis. What do I mean by that? Well, listen to this Canadian member of parliament suggest that not only are the freedom protesters Nazis, but that also the sound of a truck horn actually means Hail Hitler. Take a listen.
How many guns need to be seized? How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler, do we need to see by these protesters on social media?
And along that line, a woman by the name of Tamara, who is one of the main organizers of the Freedom Convoy, she was recently arrested by the police, and she's currently being denied bail. She's currently being threatened with 10 years in prison. Now, thus far, we have discussed both the narrative warfare as well as the police crackdown that the protesters have been facing. But what appears to be even more severe, and what likely has far-reaching implications, is the financial warfare that the state is waging against not only the protesters, but also anyone who supports the protesters. And to begin to understand what the implications of this actually are, well, here's what the Ottawa Chief of Police, here's what he had to say about what his force is about to do.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come.
Now, in that statement, he mentioned that if you are involved in the protest, they will find you and financially sanction you. But what does that actually mean? Does it refer to only people who are physically there on site in Ottawa? Well, that appears to not be the case. Here is, for instance, what a Conservative member of the Canadian Parliament wrote on Twitter in regards to what's actually happening with these financial sanctions. Brianne is a single mom from Chilliwack, which is a city, working a minimum wage job. She gave $50 to the convoy when it was 100% legal. She hasn't participated in any other way. Her bank account has now been frozen. This is who Justin Trudeau is actually targeting with his Emergencies Act orders. And I suspect that this type of financial warfare will only escalate given the fact that GiveSendGo, which is of course the fundraising platform that the truckers were using, well, it was recently hacked and all of the names, addresses, and dollar amounts of the donors are now floating around online. In fact, people are now making Google Maps, you can see one of them up on screen right there, where all of the donors are represented as pins on the map. And of course, the intrepid mainstream media in our country is looking to get to the bottom of how this could have possibly happened. For example, the Washington Post is now contacting people whose donation info was leaked and who gave as little as $40 to the truckers to ask them why they did so. And attached to that tweet, you can see an example of an email from the Washington Post, which has this question. Can you call or reply to this email to share what motivated you to contribute to the campaign? Now, really spend a quick moment to take this in. Hackers breached the private information of tens of thousands of donors over on GiveSendGo, which is, of course, an illegal act. And the legacy media in this country, instead of condemning the hack or trying to get to the bottom of who actually conducted it, well, they are instead now harassing the actual donors, asking them to justify their donations. This is just the world we're living in, where the government, alongside the police force, the banking institutions, and the legacy media outlets, they all work in concert to attack those who they don't agree with. And frankly, don't expect this to end anytime soon, because as Ronald Reagan once famously said, quote, "Nothing lasts longer than a temporary government program." And indeed, wouldn't you know, just 2 days ago, Canada's finance minister, she came out and she said that these financial sanctions must be extended permanently. Take a listen.
I believe do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers. So that is something that we need to do, and we will do, and that needs to be in place permanently.
And so frankly, what this reveals is an extremely concerning development, the likes of which we very rarely see in the Western world. Because think about it, whether it's America, Canada, Australia, Europe, etc., one of the bedrock principles of our Western societies is the concept of property rights. That's one of the main reasons that, for instance, rich Chinese people, they buy property in Canada and America rather than in China. Because after 25 years, well, your property here in America will still likely be yours because we have property rights. However, this episode in Canada, well, it's revealing the fact that your money in your bank account, which you of course assume is yours, well, it's one piece of legislation away from being frozen and confiscated by the state without any due process. And so in terms of what this will actually mean for the future of Canada as well as the Western world, well, only time will tell. Although frankly, what you're actually beginning to see across Canada right now is a spreading of these protests in many different cities as people are witnessing what's happening in Ottawa and deciding to stand up against it. If you'd like to read more about anything that we've discussed thus far regarding Canada, I'll throw all those links into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a super quick moment to smash that like button.